this kind of a larger effort, this kind of a larger amount of budget that can take care of the corporate's social responsibility. From an economic perspective, if we see, I would try to segregate the efforts on the economic responsibility front into multiple categories. Probably I would call it as the act of benevolence, act of austerity, act of generating green wealth. The three elements that I would like to discuss with you. So, act of austerity principle says that use only what you generate. Just because you have a huge corpus of capital under your command doesn't mean that you have to utilize everything. Use it judiciously. Spend only what you earn. That is what the fundamental principle of austerity. Also, it says that the amount of material and labor that you utilize, it must be optimum, it must be efficiently used so that wastage is reduced. So waste reduction, optimum utilization, these are all cardinal principles that will come around the austerity principle. Benevolence, the corporates must be ready to share whatever they have accumulated as in excess. So we have seen in the recent past, corporates have created huge corpus of wealth which they are distributing it to their shareholders through buyback. It's one of the examples of many people trying to attempt their ways of handling corporate economic responsibility in the benevolence arena. Now, while having said that, by doing austerity measures, by doing benevolence act, is not what business is about. Business has a universally justified objective of generating wealth, which is very well accepted. Nobody contests that. Under such a condition, there has to be ways and means by which the corporates must be able to generate green wealth. Corporates must be able to create green products which definitely society will support it, which means that the customers will have a perception which is favoring such products, which will eventually generate a loyal set of customers, and finally it may create a set of a brand equity and brand loyalty which can be converted into revenue and stakeholder value addition. Now, with this kind of an environment, the wealth generation is taken care of and wealth utilization also will be taken care of. But there is one set of stakeholders called investors which will have to be considered for two reasons. One, these investors are the ones who can motivate. These are the group of people who has the ability even to kill a corporate. So investors having this dual power, investors, how they can be taken care of? There are ways and means to do that. Some of the rating agencies are coming up with certain indices which looks at corporate sustainability performance as the basis. So they are called as the ESG indices, economic social governance indices. These kind of ESG indices looks at the ESG performance so that investors can actually look at the scripts available in this index, and if they want to promote them, they can promote, and that can motivate the corporates to perform more better in the sustenance arena so that they are assured of an entry into the equity market and an easier source of capital. At the same time, the investors can play a different role also. They can have a penalizing role as well. If they don't perceive the benefits coming from the corporates from an ESG perspective, they can even stay away from these scripts or stay away from the market operations related to these scripts, which may eventually result in a complete failure. We may call it as an endemic systemic failure of the whole script. So those kind of situations can happen, and hence corporate economic responsibility is a wider ramification of many activities corporates do. From an environmental perspective, if you look at, now there are many issues as an environmental problem which is plaguing the society, right from the greenhouse gas emission that is affecting the climate. There are issues of excessive utilization of natural resources. There are issues with respect to waste management, dumping of toxic, non-biodegradable waste. So many of these issues are prevalent. Moreover, the other issues of privacy, data security, health and hygiene, all those issues also gets added up as problems of society that also must be handled. So there are issues which the corporates have at in their agenda, which they can work around and which they can bring fruitful solutions to the society. Now, the most interesting among the realms is the political realm, where corporate political responsibility is something which we have rarely discussed as part of sustainability, but then now currently that also is coming into picture. The political behavior of the corporate, it is actually making headlines in the newspaper nowadays. So as part of the corporate political behavior, we have to have a mechanism where the political behavior can be audited. The scholars, the investors, the stakeholders must have a say in auditing and analyzing the kind of behavior corporates are demonstrating in the political arena. Now, if you look at the kinds of behavior that we restrain corporates from doing, we almost see almost every kind of those behaviors that we restrict, like lobbying, bribing, campaign funding, we do tax evasion, data fudging, exploiting loopholes in the law. All practices are prevalent in the corporate world. So these kind of audits are very rarely being undertaken. Then it has to be more rigorous. It has to be incorporated into many of the performance indices that gets created around the CSG norms. Among the peculiar behaviors, we also observe that there are times when corporates enter into dual games, where on one side corporates promote through NGOs certain legislations to be accepted. In the power corridors, they act in a different way, preventing those legislations to come up and survive. There are also situations where the corporates promote anti-competition legislations. There are situations where corporates enter into international agreements and make those agreements complicated. There are also situations where corporates literally use their spending for CSR activities as a cover to control allegations, scandals, and all kind of illegal activities they perform. By doing all these things, literally these kind of sustainability efforts are becoming a mockery, and it's becoming a public relations gimmick. Sustainability activities are not without a cost. Definitely sustainability activities carry a cost. Now when you say that there is a cost, somebody has to accept this cost. Most of the time what happens is, when there is a cost and when the customers are not ready to accept this cost, either due to their reluctance or due to their ignorance, what happens is the corporates are not getting a level playing field. Corporates get disadvantaged. So under such conditions, it is not fair to expect the corporates to invest in these kind of noble public ideas when they are obviously not giving them any advantage. Therefore, there has to be a mechanism to absorb the cost that the corporates are spending on sustainability efforts. It is very much possible that the sustainability efforts made can be brought up in a viable manner provided adequate protection and promotion is provided to the green products they create, promote the clean technologies, and finally it all gets rewarded in the capital market. So the ultimate test of all the efforts in sustainability is in the capital market. So there has to be ways and mechanisms that needs to be devised such that these kind of efforts get adequately rewarded in the capital market. Now, when we see all these kind of high ideals that we speak in terms of corporate sustainable development, we think that these are all very modern concepts that has come up. But if we see the history, due to many reasons, the ancient texts have not been referred properly. During the times around 1900 BC to 300 BC, that's the time when many of the ancient texts have been created. In many of these ancient texts, rudiments of most of these ideals are very well expressed. If you look at the history from a reasonable extent, in the 4th century BC, when Kaudilya created the Arthashastra, and years after that, in the 15th century AD, when Machiavelli created the Prince, these two master treatises on public administration and economics has more or less some amount of commonality, or rather large amount of commonality, because both of them assume a state governed by a king at the helm of affairs. There, the fundamental truth that both the books communicate is on the corporate sustainability reforms that needs to be flowing from the king to the society. So in the modern world, when capitalist economy is surviving, every corporate is being governed like a democratic state. At one point in time, we had king in the state. In the corporate, we have a CEO and a board to replace them. So if the Arthashastra talks about a king to spread corporate social responsibility and corporate sustainability reforms to the society, then here the CEO and the board has to take the ownership and needs to percolate it down to the stakeholders. As we go down into the Upanishads, we hear that the ideals that is being spoken in Arthashastra and even in the Prince has certain commonalities. There they say that the giver, who is the giver here? The giver is the king. The giver gets what he gives in multifold ways. So, assuming that giving is a behavioral pattern that has a basis in the Indian classical philosophy that describes the universal ethics. So, the Indian classical philosophy describing universal ethics has 4 fundamental principles. It insists on speaking the truth, the satyam. It insists on practicing the truth, dharma. It insists on reaching a state of self-actualization, the liberated soul, which is the moksha. It ultimately believes in whatever effects that we enjoy today is because of the cause that we have done in the past, or all the efforts that we have done in the past. So in other words, these 4 elements forms the basis of the behavioral pattern exhibited by the giver. So the king, the giver, having this fundamental bedrock of qualities will provide what the society needs, and society will provide back to the king same in multifold ways. As we go down, we hear the Arthashastra continuing to say that a king who provides dharma to the society will be protected by the same dharma. So now, to finally conclude, we look forward to save the society from poverty. Therefore, A poor who doesn't have wealth cannot support the society. A wealthy who is not truthful cannot serve the society. So somebody who is wealthy and truthful alone can serve, support and sustain a society.